Okay, so welcome again, everyone, to this Lower Raritan Watershed Partnership presentation. Um, we are here today with David Smith, who is going to help us celebrate the wildlife in our local Highland Park landscape. Um, Dave is an instructor in environmental geomatics and geodesign with the landscape architecture program at Rutgers. He's been at Rutgers since the fall of 2013. He has a background in both art and in ecology, as well as geomatics. He has worked as a graphic artist and has just done an amazing job in sort of thinking like an artist in developing this presentation on Highland Park's wildlife. So he's thinking like an artist, like a landscape architect, like a lover of critters, big and small. And I am very pleased to introduce Dave for his presentation. We are not alone celebrating the wildlife in our local landscape. So I'm going to turn it over now to you, Dave.
Probably help if I unmuted myself. So I hope everybody's doing well tonight. So this is we'll just jump right in, shall we? After I have clicked all those things, now I need to. Okay. So yeah, a lot of this is going to be about sort of my experience doing wildlife photography. Essentially, I live here in Highland Park, and I don't drive. I grew up in Philadelphia, and there just was not a lot of impetus to get that license while I was growing up. And so now I'm here, and so all of the things that we're going to look at, all of the animals, all of the photography that we're going to see, is in places that I can walk to from Highland Park here. So it's going to expand a little bit beyond Highland Park itself, and we'll look at that in a couple of minutes. But sort of the first question that you might kind of think about is that this is a tremendously developed area, right? New Brunswick, there's a city right across the city. In fact, here, let's look at a little bit of an aerial photograph of the area, right? And this is Highland Park, parts of New Brunswick, Franklin Township, a little bit of Piscataway. And if we know what
Dave,
this
you need
place
to
is
share your
like.
screen.
Am I not sharing my screen?
I'm seeing it.
I can see
Yeah.
it. I see it too.
Oh, good.
You,
Okay,
you
great.
may want to go up to the left of the tab where it says meeting, and sometimes the down caret you have to choose the shared screen.
Okay, good. But everybody else is seeing it.
Got it
Mhm.
now. Okay,
Okay, good.
thank you.
Right. So we look. Yeah. So we look at this area. It is very, very developed. Right. We know that it's very, very developed, and sometimes it is helpful to just be able to look at it all at once and just see. This is not what we would think of as being kind of a natural landscape. Right. This is a very developed landscape. And we don't really think about it as being a place where we're going to actually encounter a lot of wildlife, right? We tend to think of wildlife being associated with wild places. And
Oh, in your house.
I'll ask everyone else to mute themselves, please.
thanks. Um, and so this area is very much not what most people would consider a wild place. So thinking about wildlife is probably not on most people's minds when you're sort of moving around here. And I want to change that a little bit. And so I'm going to look here a little bit at this sort of group of, these are sort of the places that I have been spending most of my time going out, taking my photographs. And this is not going to be sort of like a tour based, like, oh, this is what we found at the ecological preserve. This is what we found in Johnson Park. What I really want to focus around here is different landscape conditions and sort of the different types of animals that we could expect to find in some of the landscape conditions that we're going to find here. And so I'm going to start here with the backyard. And one of the things I want to point out here is, before we get started, is that it's important when we think about these sort of experiences with wildlife that we should not just be looking, but we also should listen, right? Being able to hear and identify that there's something there, starting to be able to identify what it is by ear, and then being able to sort of look and see, okay, this is what I'm actually hearing, is important. So before we sort of start to look in some of these sort of more naturalistic, in as much as we find those around here, landscapes, I want to start just in the backyard, right, with some of the animals that you are likely to encounter on a daily basis without really going out of your way. Just basically everywhere around here you're likely to find them. I'm going to start here with one of our most widespread birds, very hardy, very versatile little bird, and probably the first thing that you heard when you woke up this morning, possibly before your alarm, because they're starting to get really, really noisy this time of year. And so you probably woke up to something like this, right? You hear this noise, you hear this sound. It's getting to be close to, it'll be dusk soon. You'll probably hear a lot of this again. And so this is, again, just a part of your sort of everyday life, right? And of course, over the last couple of weeks, right, you'll be, cardinals are going to be here year round, but you're going to start hearing their call, right, their song. And you're going to hear this all day. It's just going to keep going, right? But it's amazing, right? And of course, one of my personal favorites is the blue jay, right? Very, very extremely common bird. This is actually a particularly important bird for me individually because I don't necessarily consider, I take these photographs. I like birds. I like to learn about different birds and be able to ID birds. But I don't consider myself a birder because I am much more interested in, I kind of think of myself more as a bird watcher, right? Which is, for a lot of people, that's an archaic and a bad term. But I'm much more interested in the experience of, to share time with the bird, to share time with the animal, to watch it and sort of be in the same place rather than thinking about lists and counts and seeing new birds that I haven't seen before, which is always exciting, but is not the goal for me, right? And so the blue jay in particular is kind of a reminder to myself. The blue jay is an amazingly beautiful animal. It is extremely smart. It's extremely intelligent. It makes crazy, weird noises. And so for me, this is a constant reminder of I never want to get to a point where I am not excited to see a blue jay, right? They're very common, but they're also incredible. And they make weird noises, right? We hear this all the time. But then you get the robot noises. So I do love me a blue jay. But of course, it's not just about nothing but birds. I like wildlife in general. For the most part, what we're going to look at here is going to be birds, because birds show the sort of the most diversity that are kind of easy to spot, right? So our insect life is going to be probably significantly more diverse in this area than our birds. But birds are, very diverse, very present, very easy to sort of spot and identify and recognize that they're there. But we also have common mammals, right, everywhere, right? And so one of these, we're going to find pretty much everywhere is going to be the eastern gray squirrel. We're lucky enough here in Highland Park to have a fairly large population of the black morph gray squirrels, which are especially cool. I think they're just incredibly beautiful, that sort of black morph. But at the same time, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to include just the cutest photo of a squirrel that I found. In fact, when I was taking this picture, this was actually near the entrance to the Meadows, and there was a guy walking past, and he was like, "What are you taking a picture of?" And I don't just this really cute squirrel. And I'm here with my 500 millimeter lens, and I'm just taking a picture of this really cute squirrel being cute. And of course, the sound kind of ruins the effect a little bit, right? Just terrible. It's still an incredible little animal, right? And of course, this is everybody's enemy if you have a garden, right? The groundhog, also known as the whistle pig. But aside from that, it's a great animal. It's beautiful. The one thing that I want to kind of like to include this photo here is to kind of ruin your view of the groundhog by pointing out the ears. And that I never noticed this until very recently is that groundhogs have people ears, and it just freaks me out. Just like people ears on this little guy. And so that always kind of sticks in my head whenever I see one. And of course, we do have that insect diversity, and I can only capture a small amount of it, usually because it's not what I'm looking for. It's not, I can't necessarily identify everything. But some of the things are very, very easy to identify, very easy to see, like this eastern tiger swallowtail. And if you have a butterfly bush on your property, you have these guys, right? This is a super, super common sort of summer visitor. And they just love butterfly bush. They're going to spend a lot of time, sort of their mating areas are going to be sort of at the forest edges, but you will definitely see them in your backyard, especially if you have butterfly bush, right? So I do want to leave the backyard, obviously, because those are things that we're all familiar with. We all see every day. And so I want to point out some of the things that are going to be a little bit less every day, a little bit less mundane, right? And I want to start here with the woodland interior, right? So forest lands, we don't have a lot of them. We don't have a lot of core forest area because our forest patches are so small. But one of the places where we actually do still find a fairly substantial area of forest here is in the Rutgers Eco Preserve, right? And so we can actually look, especially here at, mainly in this case, we're going to be looking at upland forests. And of course, one of the greatest birds ever, probably the cutest bird, arguably cutest bird, is the tufted titmouse, right? And you'll hear this throughout the forest, probably around now. They'll be starting to be pretty noisy. And they live in hollows in the trees that are made by other birds, right? So we have this amazing kind of relationship between different animals interacting with each other, either directly or indirectly, right? And so a lot of these hollows that these birds are going to nest in are going to be made by woodpeckers, right? Like these incredible pileated woodpeckers. If you've never seen one of these, highly recommend it. They're incredible. You just sort of see their incredible patterning, this amazing sort of red tuft on the head. And these guys are about the size of a crow. They are not small. And they are going to make a good big hole in this dead tree and eventually once they move on, that'll make a nice little place for that titmouse to make a nest. And also, they sound like this, which is hilarious. Pileated woodpecker, S-tier bird. Also, as we sort of get into, so some of the, the titmouse and the pileated woodpecker we're likely going to find in some of the sort of denser portions of the forest. In some of the areas where the forest becomes a little bit less dense, where the distance between the trees sort of spread out some, we'll start to see other kinds of birds, like this eastern wood pewee. And basically the idea here is that they need a little bit more space because a pewee here is going to feed by essentially catching insects in air, right? And that's how they hunt. That's how they get their food. And so in this case, I managed to get this particular pewee sitting on the nest, this very sort of characteristic, sort of nondescript, tight little small nest that they're going to make, and sort of the lichen there that's a part of that nest is actually very characteristic of sort of wood pewee's nests. And you never guess where they're actually going to get their name from. I can't imagine where they came up with the name for the eastern wood pewee, other than the fact that they say pewee. Right? A lot of birds are actually named after the sounds that they make. So some of these open forest areas are good for really just a couple of our sort of aerial predators in terms of sort of larger predators. And so this guy is a juvenile Cooper's hawk, and Cooper's hawks are a little bit unique in terms of sort of the habitat use and behavior, because these are extremely, extremely nimble flyers, right? So some of the hawks that we're going to talk about a little bit later like to be at the forest's edge so that they can kind of perch and then fly out into the open areas. But because the Cooper's hawk is such a good flyer, is so agile, what it's actually able to do is to perch in trees within the forest area and just navigate between the trees, between the branches, and catch their prey within sort of the woodland interior. They need a little bit of space, can't be super, super dense canopy, but within that forest area, Cooper's hawks are going to be sort of at their best in terms of hunting. I think probably because smaller birds that they prey on probably don't expect them to be able to catch up. And of course, much less intimidating when you hear the sounds they make. And we'll have, out there, especially in the sort of more open areas of the forest, we will frequently find red foxes. Red fox populations seem to be on the rise lately, because I have seen over the last few years just lots of them. And you're not likely that you're going to hear this if you see one, but off in the distance, especially at night, you might hear them out there barking. And just a tremendously beautiful animal, right? And as we get into the forest and we get around sort of the streams within the forest, water bodies within the forest, we'll start to see some of our more exciting insect life, right? And so we'll get lots of damselflies, we'll get lots of insects like that, and here this ebony jewelwing is just one of the most amazing animals I've ever seen. Just incredibly beautiful. There's tons of them out there in the eco preserve a little bit later in the summer around Buell Brook. Keep an eye out. They're incredibly, incredibly beautiful, and there'll be a bunch of them out there. So those are things that you'll sort of find in areas that are, either sort of up a little bit above the understory or in sort of less dense areas of the forest that have a little bit less of sort of a scrubby understory. They're going to be a little bit more open, a little bit more grassy herbaceous vegetation. That scrubby woodland understory is also going to be home to sort of a special sort of group of animals, dense thickets in the sort of forest understory, and we'll see things like our favorite eastern chipmunk. Now I don't have a sound file for here because I couldn't find one. I haven't recorded any of these sound files. These are sort of taken from various sources that I'll talk about later in the talk. And they're out there and I want to record them, but one of the problems with being where we are is that it's basically impossible to record anything without the sound of cars. Basically anywhere you go around here, the deepest part of the eco preserve, just the drone of cars everywhere. So it made it difficult. I was actually kind of considering sneaking in a version of the Christmas song where Alvin wants a hula hoop. But when I originally did this talk, it was a bunch of 20-year-olds who would have no idea what that was. But yeah, this chipmunk is out here doing what chipmunks do, popping his little head out and seeing what's going on before he runs off into the thicket. Another bird that you're probably going to start hearing a lot from in the next couple of weeks is going to be the white-throated sparrow. This is a migratory species. They spend their winters up here, but they start to get noisy when it's time for them to start moving on. And you may have started to hear a little bit of this, and you definitely will over the next few weeks. Probably have heard this and not really known what it was. It's one of these little white-throated sparrows. One of my favorite bird songs. And of course, once we get a little bit later into the summer, you will hear the Carolina wren all the time. So this sound that you'll hear all summer, Carolina wren. Very cool bird. Again, spends its time in bushy thickets, sometimes in the forest, sometimes you'll find them outside of the forest. This one is having a nice little lunch of a spider. So a lot of that we're kind of talking about sort of the interior of the forest, right? And again, sort of thinking about this idea that there's very, very little of that core forest around. But what we have lots of is the forest edge, right? So that space that's where there's the edge of the forest, basically to a certain distance towards the interior, 50 or 100 feet, and then the area outside is going to be sort of open, right? And there's a variety of species that are really, really closely tied to this specific edge, this sort of open and woodland kind of interface, right? And so one case here, right? This is the yellow-rumped warbler. This is my this is the cover boy for my talk here, and these you'll find these often. This is a winter bird around here. You'll find them often around the edges of meadows, in sort of forested areas around meadows along that edge, and they'll warble. That's why they call them warblers. And I'll admit, this is a tough one to be able to identify by ear, because a lot of warblers are. That takes a higher level of ID expertise than I have at this point. We'll also get, especially around the summer, we'll get the great crested flycatcher. We had a lot of these last year, and I love these because when you start to listen to them, they're just absolute, just the most Jersey bird that I can think of, right? Because listen to this. Hey, 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 I'm over here, right? They're very East Coast birds, right? Also, we will occasionally find in migration something like this amazing palm warbler, which I did actually photograph in the Meadows a couple of years ago. Again, they're warblers, still gonna warble. A little faster warble this time. Really a treat to see one of these guys. We'll also find ruby-throated hummingbirds, right? So the ruby-throated hummingbird is sort of the only hummingbird that we're likely to see here on the East Coast. And we'll find these at the forest edge. We'll find these around gardens. We'll find these around orchards and areas where we're likely to find kinds of flowers, usually sort of conic-shaped flowers that they'll use to eat at. This one I actually did take near the Meadows. There's a little, like by the community gardens over there that you'll see. There's a little sort of maintenance area where they have some water treatment things, and there's this big brush pile that they keep there, which is a great place to see. Birds, including this incredible ruby-throated hummingbird, which you'd be surprised are aggressive little bastards. I have a picture somewhere where one of these hummingbirds is just harassing a yellow warbler, which we'll look at in a couple of minutes. But again, super one of the coolest birds I think there is a good hummingbird. We also have really interesting, again, insect life. I wish that I'd sort of captured more of this, but we have sort of great butterflies that are going to be found very frequently around that sort of forest edge, like this little wood satyr and classic red admiral, which are just wild, incredibly cool insects. And then we come to the sort of prototypical edge species, right? And this is the point where I'm going to say some things that are controversial. Because I've encountered a lot of people that have decided that they hate white-tailed deer. And now, understand, I have a background. I have a master's degree in ecology. I'm not naive. I am in favor of hunting. I'm in favor of population control. But I understand that this is a pest species. I understand the damage that it causes to our forest structure. I understand that it is a part of the complex life cycle of Lyme disease. But you're not allowed to hate this animal. It's ridiculous. This is a native animal, and the reasons that it causes so much trouble are all the result of human decisions. You can want to solve the problem. Population control can be a part of that solution. Hunting can be a part of that solution. But it is ridiculous to hate this handsome boy because of the decisions that have been made by humans and not the deer. So, if that's you, please settle down, right? It's not the deer's fault. Don't hate the deer. Also along, so moving swiftly on from that, also along the sort of edge areas, foxes. Like I said, we'll find a lot of foxes around here recently. And I got this one during one of those big snowstorms that we had over the winter, and we both really startled each other when we encountered each other. So I managed to snap this one off really quickly. I love the snow on the nose. Really happy with that one. So that's one of those conditions, right, where we have fairly sizable sort of area of forest, and this is that sort of interface between the edge of that forest and sort of the opening sort of areas surrounding it. But we also have other conditions that have similar characteristics, but are a little bit different, right? And so these are what we call savannas or patchy woodlots, right? So basically open areas, sort of open grassy areas or meadows where we'll find trees, sort of single trees, or sort of small groups of 4 or 5 trees, or slightly larger sort of patches of trees, but not anything that anybody would identify as woods, right? Just a few trees in an open area. And these are really characteristic, especially of some of the major parks that we have in the area, right? So Donaldson Park, Johnson Park, very characteristic of this sort of savanna and patchy woodlot kind of environment. And so one of the species that we'll start to see coming in for the summer fairly soon, and more we're going to hear it than see it, is going to be the chipping sparrow. And again, this is another one of my favorite birds. Not a super showy, not a super fancy bird, but I do love a chipping sparrow, and I love their little sounds. We might get that one. Or we'll often get this one, right? And again, this is one of those ones that you might hear and don't immediately recognize because it's a small, non-showy sparrow. A lot of people don't really know how to differentiate one sparrow from another. My grandmother used to all call them LBJs, or little brown jobs. But different sparrows, different behavior, different timing, different sounds. I do love a good sparrow. I also love a good flicker. Flickers are interesting because they're going to be really dependent on kind of both the sort of tree element of the savanna area and the sort of open lawn area of the savanna, because this is a type of woodpecker that exhibits a very strange behavior in that it uses dead trees and it pecks holes in the dead trees to create nesting sites. But most of its foraging is actually done on the ground. It's actually going to spend time on the ground, usually in sort of lawn areas, hunting for insects. Ants are a particular favorite. Of course, that's in the summer. A lot of birds were going to have sort of different diet depending on the time of year. Flickers are a year-round species around here, so in the summer you'll find them on the lawns hunting for ants. In the winter, you'll find them in the trees hunting for sort of foraging for berries. This winter, I had like 3 of them constantly right outside of my window because I have a tree that has some berries on it. Then they ran out of berries and they moved on, and I was disappointed. And you'll hear this one a lot. When you hear this, you know it's a flicker. And yeah, they can go on like that for a really long time. We'll also encounter, this is a year-round species, but they're migratory, so now that it's getting to be sort of towards the spring and towards the summer, we're going to see these a lot more. And this is the common grackle, this amazing sort of blue and purple iridescent bird that we will see in these kinds of sort of semi-open, sort of savanna environments. And this one in particular seemed to be under the impression that I had said something about his mama and was really, really not thrilled with me. But fortunately, I got a really good picture out of the interaction. And again, the sound they make, they're just crackling. Now, when you see a migratory flock of one of these, and you have about 1,000 of these flying overhead, making this sound, it sounds like an absolute riot. I'm actually going to put in a petition to say that a migrating flock of grackles should be called a riot of grackles for that very reason. And of course, we will encounter this bird, whose scientific name is Tyrannus, which you can tell to look at it, right? It is absolutely one of the most terrifying and intimidating birds that we've looked at today. This is the eastern kingbird, and you'll find these sort of at the sort of in the lower branches of the trees in these kinds of environments, sort of flying in and out. Again, this is one of those species that is going to hunt by catching insects in the air. And you'll hear this little noise that they make. And while they're not really very intimidating to look at, they are kind of pretty aggressively territorial, and so I think that's where the name comes from, them being a little bit kind of aggressive in sort of maintaining their personal space, we'll say. And of course, in these areas are perfect for some of our predatory species, right? Some of our raptors, especially that are out there going for some of our smaller birds, in some cases, rodents, those kinds of things. This is probably my favorite bird photo that I have in this talk, and this is of a merlin. So this is a small falcon. It is about the size of a robin, maybe slightly larger. The wingspan is going to be significantly larger just because the form of the bird and sort of that it's a raptor and not a thrush. And this was actually taken in Donaldson Park. There are, I think, a couple of them that have spent the last couple of winters in the park, and I just love this one, right? And again, not a super intimidating sound unless probably you're a mouse. Typical kind of raptor call. And of course, we have the red-tailed hawk, right? Red-tailed hawks, very, very common in this kind of environment. In city parks, in our sort of, in our suburban parks, see them everywhere if you're looking for them. And you'll definitely hear them if you listen. Classic red-tailed hawk call, right? But do be careful. It is important to both listen and look, because what you also might be hearing is one of these guys. The blue jays do an incredible job of mimicking a red-tailed hawk. Probably because they think it's funny, but also probably to scare off competitors. We're going to find a lot of, this is where we're also going to find our scavengers, right? So, the amazing American crow, very common out here, especially around, passing through this time of year. Obviously year-round bird, but they move around a bit. We'll also get this incredible turkey vulture. Right? And so we'll see turkey vultures around a lot. A lot of times you'll find them sort of perched on structures. This one here was in a little patch of woods here. Let me get close enough to take this picture. A lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about vultures. Look at this bird. It's a good bird. Not noisy though, so I don't have a sound file for this one. So let's quickly go into our aquatic environments, right? So we have this entire area is going to be largely sort of defined by the river, right? So the Raritan is a large part of why we're all here. And so this is where we see a lot of the really interesting diversity, at least as far as I'm concerned. We kind of start in the deeper river, right, where we may find mostly sort of our diving and fishing birds, right? So here we have a young double-crested cormorant. Again, not very noisy. Here in the winter, we will encounter some of our sort of diving and fishing ducks, like this common merganser. I love this photo because it captures one of the great things about larger ducks, which is when they take off from the water, they can't just jump up and fly, right? So they have to kind of run across the water to get a good running start before they can actually take off. And I managed to catch this. Which was a great experience. One of these days I'm going to get a better photo of this happening, but I always love to see it. And I make little duck noises. Another one of my favorite winter birds is the bufflehead. I love a good winter duck, and so these guys are little. It's probably about a foot in length. And so I do love me a tiny duck. These guys are diving ducks as well, like the merganser, but these are generally going to be diving for insects and other invertebrates. Right? And they make duck noises. And they are derpy little goofballs, and I love them. But it's not all just diving. So we will, over the Raritan, especially over the summer, we will see a surprising number of osprey. And they are good fishing birds. And they will fly over, they will identify the fish that they want to catch, and they will jump down feet first and try to grab it. This particular osprey has missed its prey in this particular case. Got another one a little bit later on. And we'll hear this sound. They're a little whistly. So that's the deeper part of the water, right, where you're likely to find somebody fishing or diving for some of those invertebrates. The shallower parts of the river are going to have a different group of birds that are going to be, and other animals that are going to be associated with them, like this pair of mallards, right? Mallards are not diving ducks. They will just kind of duck their head under. They're dabbling ducks, and so sometimes what you see is a whole group of mallards or black ducks with just their little duck butts in the air and their heads down, sort of dabbling down there, trying to find. Again, in this case, during the summer, they're mostly looking for invertebrates. Other times of year, in the winter and fall, they're going to be looking for grains and fruits and those kinds of things. Then we have surprisingly common around this area are great blue herons. And I don't understand how anybody looked at dinosaur fossils and for decades and decades said, no, that's a lizard. Obviously, they had never seen a heron because that's a dinosaur. Right? And they're waders, so they're going to wade around in the shallow waters, again, looking for fish to pass by, and they're like little spearfishers. They'll just, dip their head down and just grab that fish right out of the water with their bill. And you won't hear the sound that they make very much unless they get spooked and fly off, and in which case you'll hear this horrible noise. I think if I wanted to be left alone, I would probably make that noise too. Similar, we'll also get great egrets around here. Very similar, all white. A little bit quieter. A little bit more of a cooing sound from the egret than from the blue heron. So we'll get a lot of waders. We'll get a lot of some of those dabbling ducks. But then we get up to the tidal flats, right? Because this part of the river is a tidal estuary, right? And so that will open up this sort of intertidal zone that's going to attract different animals, right? Like this killdeer, right? And this is again one of those cases where we can never figure out where the name came from, other than it just keeps saying killdeer over and over again. We'll also get sandpipers, right? And so we tend to think of sandpipers as being shorebirds along the sea, but we'll get them up here along Donaldson Park, and a lot of times they're hard to see because they're really quite small and they kind of camouflage in a little bit. But you'll see these small flocks there. They're small. They're probably about the length, a little bit longer than the length of your finger. But you'll see them out there in little groups, poking through the soil poking through the mud for invertebrates, making this noise. Okay. And of course, foxes, again, because we've seen a lot of foxes in this area over the last few years. I also want to talk a little bit about the backwater, right? So these are areas that are sort of going to be along the river, but are going to be still water. They're going to be less impacted by that sort of tidal fluctuation. So we'll get some backwater reed swamps where we'll see some cattails and some phragmites. And to a certain extent, the Delaware and Raritan Canal is going to exhibit some of this same behavior, so we'll see some of these species there as well. And the one thing you're going to see probably the most frequently is going to be the red-winged blackbird, right? Especially now that the spring is sort of starting to move in, and over the summer you're going to be seeing lots and lots of red-winged blackbirds in these kinds of areas. Hearing them, you'll hear this sound a lot. And of course I want to include a separate photo of the female because very hard to distinguish the male from female. No, they look very different. The females are much less showy, but to my mind, no less beautiful. We'll also find sort of some of our more shy herons. This is a green heron. They like to be in some of these sort of sheltered backwater areas more so than in the sort of more sort of open sort of shallows of the river. They're a little bit shy. They're a little bit nervous around people. This one was not super thrilled to encounter me out there. And this is the sound that they make as they run away. And that's a good sound file because that's what it always sounds, because they're always running away when they make noise. Took this this winter. This is a ring-necked duck. Found this. This was in the DNR Canal. Again, just amazing. Just look at that eye. I do love a good winter duck. I can't stop saying it. And they make little chirps rather than quacks. So I do want to talk, I know we're sort of running a little bit short on time, I do want to talk about some of our sort of riparian species, right? A lot of these, a lot of these areas, especially in the when I talk about those savanna and sort of small wood, sort of patchy woodlot areas, a lot of those are going to be either upland or sort of riparian wetland areas. But there are some specific types of conditions that I want to talk about. And the first is this sort of riparian scrub, right? So a couple of small trees, some sort of shrub areas around the edge of the water. These are usually not going to be very deep or very far up along the bank. And we will hear a lot of these for the next several months, right? So the song sparrow, a little bit more widely spread, but around in this sort of scrub area, we're going to hear lots of these, right? And so this classic song, you'll hear tons of this. If you're lucky, you might catch sight of a cedar waxwing. Probably a little bit later on, once we actually start to get some fruit on the trees, some berries. Again, this is just one of the most showy, ridiculous birds I think in North America. And it doesn't have much of a song to speak of. It has this sound that I've heard described as like electricity pulsing through a power line, right? During migration periods, we might even encounter a belted kingfisher, right? And so here, as they're sort of migrating, they may sort of be found along sort of larger water bodies like the Raritan. And you can recognize them first by their sound because they do get spooked a little bit easily, but their sort of little rapid fire chittering is very telltale. And so then we move into some of the sort of riparian areas that are not so open, right? Some of the woodlands, and particularly cases like the meadows that you're going to be visiting. And so here, pretty soon, once the migration is going to start, we're going to have tons and tons of yellow warblers, like this little fella. And you will hear lots and lots of this in the meadows. Probably not when you go out there on Sunday, but a little bit later on in the season. So lots of that sound as you get out there. And of course, in Highland Park, this is everybody's favorite neighbors. We have a pair of nesting bald eagles. And of course, everybody knows the sort of regal sound that a bald eagle makes, right? I'm sorry to say, television commercials have done you dirty. The sound that a bald eagle makes is actually this. Yeah, usually they're dubbing over this with a red-tailed hawk, because this is not intimidating. And of course, because we have a mated pair of bald eagles, that means that we will have juveniles. This year, this was a particularly harsh winter, which means, from what I've heard talking to some people around the area, I don't think that they're likely to have an eaglet this year, just because it was a really rough winter. But they haven't left. Hopefully, they're going to stick around for a few more years, and we'll get a handful more eaglets in the near future. And of course, we'll get some of our famous mammals here, and we'll get raccoons out there. This photo I actually took in the meadows themselves, and I don't think I'm ever going to take a photo that's better than this. This is just such an amazing moment of. When I took this picture, I just saw this weird, like, gray, bushy thing sticking off the side of this tree, and I was like, is it some sort of, like, weird fungus or something growing out of there? And then it moved and it kind of pulled back into the tree. And there it was, just sort of looking at me from its little hollow. It had been in the tree sleeping like upside down with its sort of feet and tail at the top and its head down at the bottom. Very weird. But I love this. I love this photo. Okay, so that's my sort of little tour and my little sort of slideshow of some of my favorite sort of wildlife experiences that I've had. But I do want to kind of clean up with this idea that this is a celebration of what's still here, what remains. But I think it's really important to think about the fact that these are remnant populations of a deeply, deeply decreased diversity of the wildlife that would naturally be here, right? Habitat, when you think about habitat, habitat is a complex thing, right? It's not just there's one thing that is the habitat for wildlife in general, right? It's kind of what I've been getting at. But there's also not necessarily one thing that's habitat for a given species, right? Species need different types of conditions for different types of activities, right? So birds need a different environment for their roosting and their nesting than from where they're going to be doing their hunting and foraging, right? Some species have metamorphic life cycles, right? And they're going to need different conditions for different parts of that life cycle. All of these animals that I'm looking at here are fairly highly human tolerant. Some of them are essentially sort of self-domesticated, but lots and lots of animals are not, right? And they need that space. A lot of animals need large contiguous areas of habitat to maintain stable populations. And of course, habitat loss is one of the sort of main drivers of loss of diversity throughout the world, right? And so we need to preserve what's here and to do a better job of sort of stewardship, but also planning to sort of make sure that we make sure that as much of this habitat is available. So, all right, just a couple minutes because I want to talk about why I love to do this, right? And so, for me, I think it's great because I can go out there and I can find an amazing animal that I love to see, or something new that I haven't seen before, and I can get a great shot, right? Or I could go on a day and I don't see anything that's particularly exciting or novel or rare, but I can still get an amazing photo, right? Deer are anything but uncommon in this area, but I still think that this is a great photo. I love this shot. Sometimes I will see an amazing animal and just not get a good shot, right? So we see here, sort of on the right, this is a wood duck, one of my favorite birds. Again, big duck fan. They're very, very uncommon here, and I encountered this. It was getting dark. I was going home. There was a group of ducks, and I just lifted up my camera just because I thought maybe I'd get something, and I realized, oh my God, it's a wood duck. Hell yeah, wood duck. I actually said that out loud in the middle of the park. It's not a good photo, right? Because it was dark and there's not really much of a composition or anything. But I got to encounter that. I got to encounter that duck. And then sometimes I just see something that is just weird and wild, right? So, like I said, the great blue heron is very common around these parts. And so one day I was out there and I saw this. This is a territorial display between these two great blue herons that are kind of competing over foraging space, right? And so they do this entire show, this entire display, and it was amazing to be out there and see that for the first time. And again, it just, if nothing else, if none of that happens, I don't see a great bird, I don't see anything weird going on, I don't get a great shot, I'm out. in the world, not looking at my phone. I can stop and, sometimes people will chat with me. I will talk to other photographers, all of that stuff. And I will just have an experience of actually being present in the world. And I think that that's super important, especially for me. Probably for all of us. Okay, so I'm a little bit over my time, so I do want to thank you. Give you a couple of, a few references here to where I got some of the sort of supporting information here. Also, if anybody is interested, I do have a Flickr account. It's a Flickr Pro account, so you don't even need to get ads. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if we have time for a couple of questions.
We can take some questions, but first, a huge thanks, Dave. That was just amazing. And yeah, if we could all get out in the world, being present in the world in the way you have been, just to get that close to some of these amazing critters and get these photographs to share, and inspire with all of us. So thank you. And I see a question here in the chat box, Dave. Do you have an iNaturalist page?
I do not have an iNaturalist page. And kind of the reason there sort of comes back to the sort of thing that I talked about when I was just talking about the blue jay is that it's part of this idea of I want to be present, right? As I'm kind of doing this, and I find that a lot of the things that go along with iNaturalist and things that go along with eBird, in terms of collecting it as data, kind of distract me from that, where it sort of starts to become work for me, especially with my background in ecology. And I really, really value the work that people do in terms of that sort of gathering data, because I think that data is really important, and I think that citizen science is hugely important. But for me, it takes away from the joy of the experience of doing this. So I try to stay away from that a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Mike Orsini has a question, but I also want to note that he has invited us all over to the Griggstown Preserve, 6 Mile Run in Bunker Hill Natural Area, where we can escape car noise. So I see that
Yes, yeah.
in the notes here. Mike, I'll let you ask your question now.
Yeah, thanks, Heather, and thanks, Dave. That's a really enjoyable talk. So I have a comment and I have a bird question. Maybe you're the only person I know who can answer this. Is bird tortures me, and I don't know I can kind of do the call, but I just don't know what bird it is. But before I get to that, just comment on your disappearing habitat. So yeah, I mean we all know it, and as Heather knows, I'm the chair of the Franklin Planning Board, and of course, I have the unfortunate job of having to approve developments that are allowed by law. But we also have the ability to like frame it and make it better than what we could otherwise have, and try to preserve what we can. So that I took that to heart. Um, I can see that when I moved in 25 years ago in my house, it was a young development, a little less than maybe 10 years old, and there's not many trees, and there was since another development, but then there's some sort of preserved land, a buffer, if you will, that has undergone successional growth in the 20 years or so. Well, not quite 20, maybe it was around the subprime crisis, because they're big houses with a lot of for sale signs, so they got built at the wrong time. And between there and now you can't even see that development, because the eastern red cedars and things have grown up. We have a nice pack of coyotes across the way, also in preserved Negri grassland, which is a great place for birding. If
Nice.
you're,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you know. But what I've experienced is when I first got here, I rarely saw a blue jay or cardinal, um, or any sort of more exotic species than a robin or a crow. That has changed, just because as the landscape matures, and landscaping grows in, and buffers grow in. Certainly deer, fox, way more fox, and of course coyote. Um, one of these days, I swear I'm going to have the pack in my backyard. They're only over in the detention basin. So that's sort of heartening in a way, in that how much of it's amazing how nature sort of does adapt to the worst we kind of throw at it. So yeah, I mean that was sort of an observation I have, but you can sometimes see more as things mature.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I think one of the things when I originally gave this talk to um, my department, so I was talking to a group of young aspiring landscape architects and environmental planners, right? And I think a lot of kind of what I wanted people to get out of what I wanted that audience to get out of this was that like this is like you make this, right? Like it's your job to make this, and yeah, so that making those decisions and letting that succession happen and all of that stuff does provide a lot of benefit, especially for these kinds of species. There's not a lot that we can do for any of those species that are going to really require sort of large tracts of habitat, um, but it still makes a huge difference. Yeah.
It does. And so my bird question, my bird imitation, and forget, I call it the mousy tongue bird because that's the way I hear the call. It goes like mouse, situng, situng, situng. Do you know what that is? It's like I can't really whistle it so much as it literally sounds like it's saying mouse situng. And it's always three. It's like meow, situng, situng, situng.
So off the top of my head, no. But if you're not familiar with the Merlin Bird app for your phone,
Mm-hmm.
there is actually the Cornell Lab of Ornithology
Uh-huh.
has a bird ID app that you can use, and you can use a photo or you can key it out, or you can use the microphone on your phone to record it,
Mm-hmm.
and it will compare it against a library of pre-recorded sounds, and it does a pretty decent job of
Mm-hmm.
of IDing your birds. So that might be able to
All
solve it for
right,
you.
all right. I'll give that a shot. I mean,
Yeah,
I know it seems to be quite frequent in the morning because they do tend to wake me up with that, and so if I can grab like a little sound bite and then go over to that app, yeah. All right, thank
yeah,
you.
Well, on that, a huge thanks to Dave Smith for a wonderful presentation. Huge thanks to everyone for joining today. Yeah, again, you are all invited for our field trip on March 29th, Riparian Stewardship Strategies for Municipalities, a tour of Highland Parks, the Meadows, and Raritan River Trail, March 29th from 1 to 3 p.m. Please sign up on the Lower Raritan Watershed Partnership website, our events page. And this presentation has been recorded, and Dave, with your permission, we will consider posting this to our YouTube page. But at the very least, we'll get a copy of this to you and to our participants. So, with thanks again, and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
yeah. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Heather.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Have a good night, folks.
Thank
Good night.
you.